So Henry Kissinger is dead. He passed away on Wednesday, November 29th. Now, Henry Kissinger certainly had a vision for the world, and it was always a sweeping one. To the people that admired him, they saw Kissinger as a foreign policy maestro and Nobel Peace Prize winner, who smoothly transitioned into the role of elder statesman. And on the other hand, his detractors charged that he was nothing less than a war criminal, who was callously indifferent to those who suffered as a result of his vision for the world. And I quote, "It was almost as if two Henry Kissingers had lived simultaneously," end of quote. Oh, but there was only one. You have the mirage, the illusion, the persona, and that right there is one and the same with the thinly veiled angel of death, wrapped in bureaucratic stamps of approval. And so, why don't we start with a short video, just so we can try to understand why I would say such a thing.
Nixon, Kissinger oversaw the massacre of millions in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos from 1969 to 1973. He was the mastermind behind the carpet bombing of Cambodia, which deliberately targeted civilians, personally approving all 3,875 bombing raids in Cambodia. And to this day, Laos remains the most bombed country in world history. In Chile, Kissinger played a key role in orchestrating the US-backed 1973 coup that toppled the socialist government of Salvador Allende and installed the fascist Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet's brutal regime murdered thousands and subjected tens of thousands more to torture during his 16-year reign. Kissinger aided the Pakistani dictator Yahya Khan against Bangladesh's liberation war of 1971, enabling the mass slaughter of an estimated 300,000 to 3 million people. Kissinger authorized and armed Suharto, the Indonesian dictator, in his genocidal invasion of East Timor in 1975. This campaign led to the death of over 200,000 Timorese through massacres and forced starvation. In 1976, Kissinger gave his pre-approval to Argentina's right-wing military junta for their dirty war against leftists, resulting in the brutal murder, torture, and disappearance of over 30,000 people. This is only a glimpse into the extensive list of Kissinger's crimes, and new things are still being revealed every year. While Kissinger continues to be honored and held in high regard by the mainstream political establishment, it's clear that he should rightfully be remembered as one of the biggest mass murderers in history.
You know, there's a lot of dark rabbit holes we can go down when talking about Kissinger, and we'll get into more of these stories in the coming weeks. If you remember, I still owe you a video on Kissinger's quote-unquote Safari Club, so we'll get to that. However, don't you think it's interesting that the Rockefellers claim to have mentored Henry Kissinger? So yeah, let me get this straight. The Rockefellers mentored Henry Kissinger, and in turn, Henry Kissinger mentored Klaus Schwab. Well, I'm starting to get the feeling that it's safe to say this all started with the Rockefellers. As we just talked about in the video, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, the Rockefellers have been instrumental in setting the stage for the proliferation of both technocracy and global governance ideas for a very, very long time. Now that I say that out loud, I think I have a question to address in a video in the future. Did the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds split up the world, with the Rockefellers focusing on the United States and the Rothschilds focusing on Europe, all working towards the same agenda? Now, we're not going to get into that right now, but by that logic, is Klaus Schwab just the latest iteration of the latent globalist? Well, yeah, it seems that way. It's true, a lot of people don't know that Kissinger essentially recruited Klaus Schwab out of Harvard, and I quote, "In 1967, Klaus Schwab gained a doctorate of economics while in Switzerland, as well as a master's degree from John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And while at Harvard, Klaus Schwab was taught by none other than Henry Kissinger, who he would later say were among the top 3 or 4 figures who had most influenced his thinking over the course of his entire life."
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world.
Dr. Kissinger, our satellite time is running out. What wonderful opportunity to conclude our week here with such concrete proposals and ideas of how we can really create, I would say, a new world order.
Now, I'm pretty sure Kissinger was also one of the first keynote speakers of the World Economic Forum in the 1970s. which makes sense because he's the one that seeded Klaus Schwab with the money to get it started. Yes, that's right, Henry Kissinger was instrumental in this since the very beginning, from the funding of various initiatives to setting up disastrous foreign policy positions. However, the story goes much, much deeper. In fact, the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program, Klaus Schwab's supposed brainchild, is actually an almost exact replica of Henry Kissinger's international seminar that was originally run out of Harvard and was funded by the CIA. So, to get a better understanding of everything, let's jump to this article right here. And if you don't know, the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program has been responsible for seeding many of the ruling elite into positions of power within the worlds of business, civil society, and most importantly, politics. However, the supposed mastermind of the project, the World Economic Forum's lifetime leader, Klaus Schwab, had himself already been helped into his own influential position by a very similar program run out of Harvard. And of course, as stated, it was heavily funded by the CIA. Yes, that's right, the Harvard initiative in question, often referred to as Henry Kissinger's International Seminar, was one of several programs set up by senior members of organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations. In fact, during the post-World War II era, the United States was proactively creating many such programs with the intention of grooming potential young foreign leaders and installing them into positions of power. The main motive behind the establishment of these programs was ostensibly to combat and prevent communist infiltration of foreign states, while also assuring that future global leaders would be amenable to U.S. interests. So yes, originally, the United States created these secretive youth organizations with the aim of targeting potential future European leadership candidates. Yet very, very soon, no country in the world would be safe from the possible CIA-sponsored political infiltration. Essentially, these programs were created to be extremely powerful vehicles for training and installing world leaders who would be sympathetic to a Kissinger-style global government. And since then, the World Economic Forum has spawned many globalist-aligned heads of state, cabinet members, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and other powerful actors. They did this through, of course, their Global Leaders for Tomorrow and Young Global Leaders programs. And as we have talked about many, many times, Klaus Schwab has spoken very openly about how his organization has gone on to penetrate various cabinets of supposedly sovereign states. And of course, we should not be naive, as he has been planning on doing exactly this for at least 3 decades. However, it's not the thousands of people who have completed these programs who we should be most concerned about. Our real concern should be with the billions of people who have been tricked into believing that any of the leaders produced by either Schwab or Kissinger have their best interests at heart. After all, Klaus Schwab became the heir to Henry Kissinger's most important project, which is the infiltration of individuals and organizations in countries around the world, with the aim of creating globalist-aligned governments built within the framework of an outdated and soulless conceptualization of American imperialism. Klaus Schwab's activities since his time at Harvard can be seen as simply a direct continuation of Kissinger's work during the 1950s and 1960s. And again, it would be naive of us to believe that there is not someone else already groomed and trained who is going to be ready and willing to pick up Kissinger's political baton from Klaus Schwab and continue in their joint mission towards global government. Now, of course, we're going to dive into more Kissinger stories in the coming weeks and probably years. Our current issues are deeply tied to his foreign policy decisions and the establishment's vision for the world. However, we are going to transition into some other really important stories. Now just keep in mind that Henry Kissinger helped facilitate mass migration policies in the West, and I believe that they are simply using it as a way to destabilize society and to manufacture the conditions needed to move us into a new political paradigm. If you remember, about a month ago, I think, well, it seems that Kissinger was finally confessing to his role in the chaos. In his last interview before his death, Henry Kissinger spoke out against mass immigration.
It was a grave mistake to let in so many people of totally different cultural and religious and concepts, because it creates a pressure group inside each country that does that.
And I don't know, it's a little late to gain a conscience, don't you think? However, that brings us to Ireland. I debated whether or not I should talk about this, but I really want to talk about one specific point. Around the world, one of the biggest misconceptions is that politicians and government officials are swayed by morality. This is not true. Their actions are swayed by power, and power alone. Now, some quick background info. You probably heard about the Algerian immigrant who stabbed women and children, which led to protests and riots in Ireland. Well, of course, politicians are using this crisis as an opportunity, as if we could expect anything different, right? Yes, that's right. Yep, they are using this to increase their control over speech. Yes, the Irish government is now demanding new laws on hate speech, and they want it passed immediately so the government can arrest Irish individuals who speak out against their plan. Now, in spite of ample proof that they're all idiots, I still believe they know exactly what they are doing. They are simply totalitarian shitbags masquerading in virtue. And a lot of people don't realize just how dystopian Ireland is going to get. They want to put you in prison for up to 12 months for refusing to give your password to your devices so that they can check for hate speech. They also want to give you up to 12 months in prison for refusing to allow the state to read the messages between you and your spouse. And on top of that, you can even be charged for being in possession of memes. Yeah. If you can believe it, it does get worse from there. Check this out right here.
Think about it. All law, all legislation is about the restriction of freedom. That's exactly what we're doing here, is we are restricting freedom, but we're doing it for the common good. You will see throughout our constitution, yes, you have rights, but they are restricted for the common good. Everything needs to be balanced. And if your views on other people's identities go to make their lives unsafe, insecure, and cause them such deep discomfort that they cannot live in peace, then I believe that it is our job as legislators to restrict those freedoms for the common good.
Yes, you have rights, but they are restricted for the common good. Okay, yeah. Now, it blows my mind that people will say this stuff out loud and see nothing wrong with it. I can't wrap my head around it. I do not understand the mentality. They've lost their minds. The thing is, though, from America to Canada to Ireland and many others, the most dangerous thing happening on the planet is Western governments turning against their own citizens, as if we are the enemy. Nothing else really comes close. Not Russia, not China, not terrorism, nothing. In fact, right here in the United States, Joe Biden's Department of Justice and Jack Smith ordered Twitter to provide the regime with a list of every American who liked, followed, or retweeted President Trump. So what do you think? Are you on that government's enemy list? Basically, we're all on that list. But I'm going to give you a pro tip. You can do the same thing as me. Set your VPN to show Epstein's Island. And trust me, you're in the clear. They will never investigate that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, easy fix, right? Always keep in mind that the deadliest and most evil tyrants in the world all claim to be helping the people and acting in the common good. Do not be fooled by that, you should actually be alarmed. They're all using the same language too. If you hear quote-unquote protect democracy, for your safety, or for the common good, automatically know that you're about to hear some really authoritarian bullshit. And a quote from C.S. Lewis, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It may be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good, well, they're going to torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." And I couldn't agree more. So that brings us to the powder keg situation that, well, realistically is encompassing all of Europe, and to be frank, most of the world. I honestly don't know how we get out of this without complete societal chaos. The self-loathing mind virus known as Identitarianism has completely taken over governments. It is one of the strangest phenomena of the modern era. Not only is it entirely void of logic and reason, but it's also the antithesis to progress. The ironic aspect is that they claim this self-hatred is the catalyst to progress. In reality, though, it only amplifies resentment, which leads to more division and violence. And yes, we are currently living through the consequences of having Identitarianism as the leading ideology. There isn't a single person worth their salt that believes maximizing focus on immutable characteristics rather than individual merit leads to social cohesion, okay? That's just... it's so stupid. It's so very, very dumb. We have a big problem with midwits, to be honest. There are so many incredibly naive and stupid people wrapping their entire existence in these incredibly dumb ideological positions. And then, they film TikToks and social media posts proclaiming to be brilliant social philosophers. It's so insane that it's kind of funny. If you didn't laugh, you'd go crazy. So, make sure to laugh every once in a while. I mean, this stuff is basic human nature, group dynamics. If you isolate and demonize a group, that group is going to have a reaction. Further pressure on said group leads to conflict. Now just imagine splitting the entire population into identity groups, with the precept or outlook on conflict being viewed under the auspice of oppressor versus oppressed. It's baked in a dichotomy of conflict. I mean, come on. Oppressor versus oppressed. It's the same thing as victim and assailant. There is a natural conflict within the language, and that is not by accident. From race, religion, sexual preference, political affiliation, they have everybody divided. And then what do? Well, they maximize media to pin each group against each other. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen. Who could have foreseen this calamity? I mean, come on. Everyone should be able to see it, and yeah, I don't know. This is just real basic stuff. I find it incredibly weird that we even have to have this conversation. And I also find it very hard to believe that people in leadership positions do not understand all of this. It seems more like a calculated plan, the old problem reaction solution. It's the same thing with their communication teams. Let's just go back to Ireland for an example. Do you really believe that the Irish government thought this little speech was going to be a winning argument? Nope, of course not. You would have to have the mind of a teenager to believe that, stuck in Arrested Development. They know this is just going to add gas to the fire. But that's the point. This is clearly not about conflict resolution or conflict mediation. It's to stoke more chaos. And so, with that out of the way, let's talk about something weird, just for a second. And what's that next story? Well, autonomous AI weapons, of course. The Pentagon is moving towards letting AI weapons and drones automatically decide to kill humans. Now, they claim it's just to counter China. And do you believe that? Because I do not. Yeah, I have a feeling they're going to use this against domestic populations too. It's all the same to them, even if it's way, way in the future. How about we don't let that happen at all? What do you say? Now, you may ask, would the government really do that? Yes, they would. And I can exemplify this with an equation. You ready? The government making the worst possible decision for humanity, plus the ability to kill people, well, that equals a 100% chance this happens. Yes, a 100% chance, no doubt about it. And speaking of dystopian hellscapes, the Bloomberg New Economy Forum just met. In the description, a global event, they say, and I quote, "The theme for this year is embracing instability." I mean, what the hell is wrong with these people, man? It does get worse though, because in general, academia has died a tragic death. The mind virus spread its thorny vines throughout the halls of ivy and the halls of knowledge, wrapping itself around the neck of curiosity and squeezing the life out. That's right, intelligence has taken a backseat to tyrannical aspirations. In this story right here, individual carbon footprints and reducing global living standards go hand in hand. And I quote, "The pitch to save the planet relies on reducing the global living standard by upwards of 85%. What's really crazy is that they even mark it out on tables, charts, and graphs. You have to be a special kind of stupid to fall for this. Their pitch is basically this: to save your life, we are going to ruin your life. So, does that sound good? No, it does not. All of this is clearly not about sustainable development. At COP27, this climate change event, world leaders discussed their ultimate goal of monetizing nature, and we talked about this extensively. Now just imagine monetizing life itself, and then creating a tax infrastructure around that. Yeah, that's what they're doing. That's what this is about, pure greed. You are the commodity in this new system. And I have no idea how people are still adamantly denying that this agenda even exists. They write books, papers, and host full events laying out not only their overall plan, but also step-by-step guides on how they plan to achieve it. It's right there for everyone to see, if you look. And guess what? COP28 is on the horizon. I will be covering that event, no doubt about it. But I do wonder, what tyranny will they discuss this time? And just remember that technocracy is predicated on social engineering. The true goal here is to alter the behavior of massive populations, and to use the federal system to punish dissent. Yes, technocracy is the catalyst to punishment in this scenario. Nothing they are doing is to make your life better. In fact, it's just to control you. And this plan to control you originates with the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Kissinger, and Klaus Schwab. Yes, the fact is that the world is heading quite rapidly into tyranny. We are, in fact, in a revolutionary period that will dramatically change civilization. And if you think about it, the majority of people seem oblivious to the danger. So you may ask, how exactly are we sleepwalking into tyranny? Well, let's talk about normalcy bias. And I quote, This is a cognitive bias that occurs in times of crisis, leading us to disregard any signs or warnings that we are in fact in danger. Normalcy bias is a defense mechanism that lulls us into thinking life will just continue as it always has. It's essentially a reassuring presumption that things will get better, or at the very least, will not take a dramatic change for the worse. However, steady progress is not the way the world works. History itself is a story of the rise and fall of civilizations. Tyranny, poverty, and servitude are the normal state of mankind, and it would not be very difficult at all to return to that state. The pattern of history is that humans make some progress, and then evil men do evil things, and stupid men do stupid things. And then, of course, civilization itself crumbles. And so our normalcy bias is what stops us from seeing this. Yeah, you might have confidence in people because the people you know are good, productive people who are kind to others, and you might naturally assume that most people are like that. However, you do need to realize that there are also very evil people who have decided that their role is to manage your life. They are self-appointed shepherds, and they see you as their sheep. This right here is the essence of tyranny. Now, if these evil people are also foolish, they might think that they can manage the world economy and force all the quote-unquote little people to act in a certain way that creates this utopia. They might even call it a great leap forward. And that's exactly how they think. They really believe themselves to be some sort of god. Or perhaps a better way of saying that is that they believe that they can create a god, an AI god to be exact, giving them the ability to rule the world with the push of a button. The thing is that centrally managed economies have been tried many times, and they always fail, often in spectacular fashion. Now, it doesn't stop there. No, it does not. People can also be detached from reality by conformity bias, which also goes by several different names. Ayn Rand called it social metaphysics. People with this cognitive defect look to their social group to tell them what is true, and in this case, there is no independent critical thinking. In other words, this is the lazy person's way of acquiring his view on reality. It is the dream of any tyrant to have a population that acquires its beliefs this way. If a political faction can be lied to with impunity, and if blind acceptance of the lies is required to maintain membership in the group, well, that is a powerful means of control. And that kind of sounds like the Democrats, doesn't it? Any deviation from the group and suddenly you are far right. A group like that can be expected to believe just about anything. From the myriad of hate hoaxes to the various political hoaxes, they fall for each and every one. You see, the thing is that there's no limits to the lies when the target audience is essentially detached from reality. In the book 1984, George Orwell symbolized this by showing that the model citizens readily accepted the government decree that 2 + 2 = 5. And as you know, the left has openly embraced this concept, almost as a way to taunt their victims. Many of the main establishment lies are equally absurd. They are direct contradictions of what we know to be true. The fact is that simply telling the truth is a fundamental weapon that citizens can use against tyrants. And I quote, "The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world." End of quote. And yeah, I could not agree more. The fact is that truth is a dangerous weapon, and we must wield it without remorse. The truth is absolute. And so the third unfortunate human trait that favors tyrants was explained by Aldous Huxley. Huxley and Orwell each wrote novels predicting a dystopian future. Orwell's prediction involved a substantial amount of fear and coercion. However, Aldous Huxley, on the other hand, predicted a relatively smooth and easy transition to tyranny. Huxley said the population would be distracted with trivial pleasures and would hardly notice the prison being built around them. He foresaw how society could sleepwalk into tyranny. And I quote, "There will be a dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it. And that's because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmaceuticals. And this seems to be the final revolution." End of quote. Well, damn, that sounds like modern society, doesn't it? You cannot turn on the TV without seeing a mind-altering pharmaceutical ad. Or the Yuval Harari quote, for example. He claims that the World Economic Forum has a plan to distract everyone with drugs and video games. And I quote again, "By means of ever more effective methods of mind manipulation, the democracies will change their nature. The quaint old forms will remain. The underlying substance will be a new kind of non-violent totalitarianism. The ruling oligarchy and its highly trained elite of soldiers, policemen, and thought manufacturers and mind manipulators will quietly run the show as they see fit." End of quote. However, that is not all. One more quote. "A prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where, through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitude. He believed that the greater part of the population is not very intelligent, dreads responsibility, and is perfectly happy to let itself be ruled." End of quote. And yeah, that does sound familiar, doesn't it? He went on to expand on that by saying this: "A vast communications industry, concerned in the main neither with true or the false, but with the unreal, the more or less totally irrelevant. The media will cater to man's almost infinite appetite for distraction." End of quote. And again, yes, we can see that all around us. It's true, while most people are not paying attention, most of the key elements protecting freedom and prosperity are now under attack by people who wish to control our country and the world. Globalist leaders wish to put an end to national sovereignty, enforce a quote-unquote New World Order, control information, put an end to free speech. They plan to ban our only reliable sources of energy and impose a digital currency that will allow complete monitoring and control of every citizen with a Chinese-style social credit system. At home, the United States is in the quote-unquote looting the treasury phase of empire collapse. Our military appears weak, woke, and overextended. The dominant media function as a branch of the Democrat Party. The upper levels of the Justice Department also function as a branch of the Democrat Party. Identity politics is widely taught and supported by governments from around the world, which quite obviously is going to lead to social breakdown. These are not conspiracy theories, and the evidence is mostly right out in the open. The people who are planning to be your future masters are not worried about stating their plans because the vast majority of people are distracted with their trivial amusements. They are busy watching sports, playing video games, watching movies, and smartphone screens. We have created a culture ripe for the taking, oblivious and unconcerned about the things that really matter. People can ignore important things, but they cannot escape the consequences of ignoring important things. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The price has not yet been paid. Not at all. So here we are, at the brink.
But always there will be the intoxication of power. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.